All right, you. Ready to jump into Act 1, Scene 3 of Romeo and Juliet?
Let's do it.
It's a big one. I mean, we're walking right into the Capulet house, meeting Juliet, her mom, the nurse.
Yeah, it's like Shakespeare throws a party and says, get to know these people because their relationships are about to be tested.
And how? So what's the vibe, like, as the scene opens? What should we picture?
It's lively, servants bustling about, probably getting ready for a feast later.
Hmm.
But there's this underlying tension, this sense of anticipation, particularly between Lady Capulet and Juliet.
You can cut the air with a knife. Lady Capulet is just so intense.
Totally. Like she's got an agenda.
Yeah.
And we quickly realize what it is Juliet's future, or more specifically, her marriage prospects.
Which is so weird, right? Because Juliet's, what, 14?
Well, the nurse keeps bringing up Lammas Eve and how old Juliet will be then.
14 and a half. Like, she's marking time by these little milestones in Juliet's life.
Exactly. But for Lady Capulet, it's all about Juliet's eligibility, being ripe for marriage. Talk about pressure.
Talk about a different perspective, and then, bam! The nurse launches into that story about weaning Juliet with the earthquake and everything. I mean, where did that even come from?
Oh man, classic Shakespearean comedy. He's got to break up the tension somehow, right?
It's true. Things are about to get really heavy.
Right. But it's also brilliant because that story, as random as it seems, reveals so much about the nurse's character.
She's kind of a hot mess, but you can tell she adores Juliet.
Totally. And those little details, the earthquake, how she had to wean Juliet because her husband... Well, let's just say it's a very vivid picture of their relationship. And speaking of pictures, enter Paris, the potential husband.
Talk about awkward timing.
Yeah.
Juliet's barely had a chance to breathe, and her mom's already picked out a suitor.
It's brutal, right? It highlights just how little control women, especially young women, had over their own destinies back then.
It's like Juliet's entire future hinges on this one meeting, whether she likes it or not.
Which makes her response even more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just, who Paris is.
Right.
It's how Lady Capulet describes him.
Like he's some kind of prize.
Exactly. Read or the volume of young Paris's face.
What does that even mean?
It's like she's saying, just look at him, isn't he handsome? That's all that matters.
So superficial. No wonder Juliet's not exactly jumping for joy.
Totally. And remember, we're talking about a society where marriages were often arranged for political or economic reasons.
Love was like a bonus, if you're lucky, I guess.
Yeah, and even Lady Capulet's language is so formal, so calculated.
Right. By my count, I was your mother, much upon these years that you are now a maid. Like she's giving a speech, not having a heart-to-heart with her daughter.
Exactly. It creates this interesting contrast with the nurse.
Oh yeah, she's definitely not afraid to speak her mind.
Not at all. She's got that down-to-earth, tell it like it is kind of vibe.
Even if it's a little inappropriate sometimes. I mean, that whole thing about women growing bigger after being with men, maybe not the best topic to bring up with a teenager.
Right. But it shows that the nurse's view of relationships is more, shall we say, experienced?
More realistic, maybe. And it makes you wonder what kind of advice she's giving Juliet behind closed doors.
Yeah, it's like she's representing a different kind of female perspective, one that's maybe more grounded in, well, the physical realities of life.
Definitely not the kind of thing they'd teach in a convent. But back to Juliet. Her response to all this is pretty telling.
Oh yeah, she doesn't just say, yes, mother, whatever you say.
Right. She's walking a fine line. I'll look to like if looking liking move. It's subtle, but she's not making any promises.
Exactly. And that's huge, considering the pressure she's under.
Yeah.
It shows that she's got her own mind, her own thoughts about love and marriage.
She's just not sure how to express them yet, or even if she's allowed to.
It's like she's testing the water, seeing how much agency she can actually have.
And little does she know, Romeo's about to enter the picture and turn everything upside down.
Talk about a game changer. But
Yeah.
that's the brilliance of Shakespeare, right? He sets up these seemingly small moments, these subtle hints of defiance that will have massive consequences later on.
It's like he's saying, pay attention to everything because even the smallest details matter. It's like we're watching this slow-motion train wreck about to happen.
And we're all kind of powerless to stop it, right?
Exactly. But that's what makes it so gripping, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that Juliet has this inner strength, this spark of rebellion.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. She's stuck between these two very different worlds, right?
Yeah.
You've got Lady Capulet, all about tradition and duty and appearances.
Yeah, like a walking, talking rule book.
Exactly. And then there's the nurse who's more about, well, let's just say she's got a more practical view of love and marriage.
You put it mildly. But neither of them is really giving Juliet the space to figure out what she wants.
Exactly. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? This young woman with so much potential, so much love to give.
And she's about to get caught in this whirlwind of fate and circumstance.
It's classic Shakespeare, right? Taking these big universal themes, love, duty, family, and weaving them together into this heart-wrenching story.
That's still relevant centuries later, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is, because even though the world has changed, those core human experiences haven't. We still feel that pull between what's expected of us and what our hearts truly desire.
And sometimes those desires lead us down some pretty dangerous paths.
Especially in Romeo and Juliet's case. But that's a story for another deep dive.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up this exploration of Act 1, Scene 3, what's your final takeaway for our listeners? What should they be paying attention to as they move forward in the play?
Well, first, just appreciate the brilliance of Shakespeare's language, how he uses every word to create these multi-layered characters and complex relationships. And second, think about the ways in which this scene sets the stage for everything that's to come.
It's like all the pieces are on the chessboard, just waiting for someone to make the first move.
Exactly. And, as we know in Romeo and Juliet, every move has consequences.
Yeah. And you, dear listener, remember those consequences can teach us about our own lives and choices. Until next time, keep diving deep into the world of great literature, and we'll be here to guide you through the good, the bad, and the ugly truths that these stories reveal.